What's up, everyone? Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, joined by the one and only BJ Taylor. BJ, we got to get our brackets all set. You have at least one set because we're about to go through it. We're going to go through region by region how BJ sees things shaking out come tournament time. Really quickly, before we get into it, we're going to start in the South region, of course. Give us a vibe check, like a pulse check, what we can expect. A lot of upsets, some Cinderella runs. What can we expect before we dive into the bracket?
Well, it's March Madness, all right? So you got to get a little funny. You got to get a little tricky, all right? The SEC is the best league in college basketball this year, but maybe, if you stay tuned, I got a few SEC teams going home a little bit earlier than you would have expected.
All right, it better not be my Florida Gators. That's all I got to say, BJ. All right, let's start in the South, where, of course, Auburn, the #1 overall seed here. Auburn dropping 3 of the last 4 coming into this, but of course they're the one. They're getting a 16 here. So walk us through how you see things shaking out.
Well, Auburn, this is a good chance to bounce back, all right? They're going to be over here in the top of the South in the Lexington region. Either the winner of Alabama State or St. Francis tonight. I think Alabama State will win. They will surprise winner of the SWAC instead of the Southern Jaguars. I'd expect Auburn to bounce back, start to find their rhythm, and get themselves going a little bit, all right? Get to Todd Pettiford, get Chad Baker-Mazar, get some of those guys feeling good about how they're playing against a 16 seed. And then you have the Louisville-Creighton matchup, all right? Now, this is an interesting one.
And really quickly, do you think Louisville should be an 8?
I don't think Louisville should be an 8. They should be higher, all right? Only a couple of conference losses this year. One of them was to Duke, the second #1 in the NCAA tournament. They've played some really exceptional basketball. But even with being the 8th seed, they have been rewarded with being in the Lexington region, right? So if they can get past the Creighton Blue Jays, Louisville will be playing their second-round game in Lexington, Kentucky, which for all intents and purposes, as we know, is a home game for the Louisville Cardinal. That's a really big punishment for your #1 overall seed to potentially have to play a team in essentially what would be a home game for the Louisville Cardinals.
Right. So if you're Bruce Pearl's squad, you're thinking like, okay, this is supposed to be the easiest path here, and they're going to get either potentially a Louisville or a Creighton. So who moves on in your opinion here?
I like what Louisville's done this season, but I have to go with Creighton. All right. Creighton played really, really well in the Big East tournament. We're able to knock off the 2-time defending Big East champs, the UConn Huskies, in a semifinal matchup. That was extremely gritty, if you didn't see it, by the way. All right. Coach McDermott has his boys playing some of the grittiest basketball in the country. They had a nice little dunk at the end of the game that they shouldn't have took, but their boys are playing with edge. They're playing with fight. And going into a matchup with Louisville, I like Creighton a little bit more. They have been just a tad bit more battle-tested than the Louisville Cardinals, who are coming out of the ACC. I'm going with Creighton. Now, going into the Auburn matchup, I don't know about that.
Okay, so we'll get to that in just a moment. But now we have Michigan, who, of course, wins the Big Ten tournament. And there's a lot of, I guess, complaints out there. Are they really a 5? And they got to go, all the way to Colorado and face a UC San Diego team who doesn't look all that bad, and their flight is certainly a lot shorter than Michigan. But how do you see that shaking out? And then also, we'll get to A&M and Yale, because Yale, we saw the magic from them last season being a 13 seed, beating a then 4-seeded Auburn. And so they're kind of hoping that the lightning and the luck strikes twice. But let's start with Michigan, UC San Diego, and we'll work our way down the bracket. How do you see this all shaking out?
Well, that's where things kind of get tricky, right, when it comes to seeding. I think a lot of times in college basketball, fan bases start to pay attention when March hits, right? So if you've only watched Michigan play in March, you feel like they are one of the best teams in college basketball because they just won 3 straight games to win the Big Ten tournament. They knocked off the Big Ten regular season champs in Michigan State. They knocked off Wisconsin in the championship game. So nobody's playing better basketball than the Michigan Wolverines, but it's all about total resume, all right? Michigan went into the Big Ten tournament losing 3 straight games, so they have a lot of momentum at the moment, but UC San Diego is a group that if you have not seen them play, those boys from the Big West can absolutely ball. They have one of my favorite players in the NCAA tournament, Aniwa Tate Jones. If you haven't heard of him, you will.
One of your top 10 players to watch.
Absolutely. This guy is one of the best at attacking the rim. He gets in the paint. He can finish at the cup, as well as he gets to the free throw line at a really, really high rate. And this time of year, free throws matter much more than you think. I'm going with Michigan in this game over UC San Diego because I couldn't go with 2 upsets back-to-back.
Okay, so you have Yale advancing here then.
I like Yale and James Johnson's group, all right? James Johnson has had one of the best seasons of any team in the Ivy League. This is a guy that will be up for a multitude of these high major coaching jobs. If he's not, there needs to be an investigation into why, all right? This Yale Bulldog group, 13-1 in conference play, a sensational season, one of the better defenses in the league, and one of my mottos for the day, one of my themes is that winning is a habit. All right, these mid-major schools, like a UC San Diego, like a Yale, all right, they are used to winning basketball games. Yale has won at a high level for a very long time this season. I expect them to pull the upset over a Texas A&M team that struggles to score the basketball, struggles to shoot from the outside, and in March, that is not something you want because that will lay you out to be primed for an upset.
All right, so we have Yale upsetting Texas A&M pretty early on. Let's kind of rapid fire here, and then we'll take another look once we get to the next round. But Ole Miss, whether it's SDSU, UNC, Iowa State, Lipscomb, how do you see this one shaking out?
All right, so I have Ole Miss matching up with San Diego State. All right, I think that's going to be a defensive matchup, but I have Ole Miss and Chris Beard moving on. Iowa State's interesting. Iowa State is a team that early on I thought could make a run to a Final Four. Not now. Their second best player, Keyshawn Gilbert, will be out for the NCAA tournament with an injury. They're going to have to lean heavily on Curtis Jones, Taman Lipsey, their senior point guard, and Joshua Jefferson on the interior. I don't think they have enough to make a deep run, but they do have enough to get past Lipscomb.
Okay, so we have Ole Miss, Iowa State. If we kind of go down the bracket here, Marquette, New Mexico, Michigan State versus Bryant. How do you see this shaking out?
Well, this is where things start to get fun. Okay, Marquette and New Mexico, you got a little Shaka Smart versus Richard Pitino, a couple of the best coaches in college basketball. And if you have not seen Marquette's best player, Cam Jones, play, you are in for an absolute treat because this guy knows how to score the basketball at a very, very high level. Arguably the best player in the Big East, even better than R.J. Lewis, who was the best player on the St. John's team this year. I like to say that Cam Jones is cut from the ilk of a Kemba Walker, a Shabazz Napier. He can lead Marquette to a huge run, to a long-distance run in the NCAA tournament. I like Marquette over New Mexico. And then moving on to Michigan State versus Bryant. I had a Bryant game earlier this year in the Hall of Fame showcase up in Storrs, Connecticut. So it's a tremendous team, tremendously well coached, but they're going up against a Michigan State team who was the regular season Big Ten champs. I like Michigan State to move on.
Okay, yeah, Shaka Smart. He's led his squad to the big dance all 4 years that he's been the head coach there. So let's look at it. We have Auburn, Creighton, and then Michigan and Yale. If we go to the top section of this bracket, moving forward, who moves ahead? Who punches their ticket?
Right, so as poorly as Auburn has played as of late, they are really, really hard to get a feel for because this is where March gets tricky, right? Sometimes you're going, this team's not playing well, and then they go into March Madness, all of a sudden they hit their stride, and they're playing like one of the best teams in the country. Auburn is the #1 overall seed for a reason, all right? 16 quad 1 wins. They have the second best player in college basketball in Janai Broome. I like Auburn to move on over Creighton, as well as if you look at Michigan and Yale. Now, this is a game as well that this very well could be Yale, UC San Diego.
Wow.
For everybody looking to pick an upset, you could have, if UC San Diego knocks off Michigan, which a lot of pundits are picking, a lot of the experts in the business are picking. I believe Matt Norlander went with UC San Diego over Michigan. 12-13 gets you a Cinderella in the Sweet 16. So I have, if Michigan moves on, I think they knock off Yale and end their Cinderella hopes, leading us to an Auburn-Michigan Sweet 16.
Okay, so we have a 1-5 with Auburn, Michigan. Quickly here, who punches their ticket to the next round out of these four?
I still have belief in Iowa State and TJ Otzelberger's group, all right? Ole Miss has been up and down through that rugged SEC. They've been through the gauntlet, and I believe they're going to be a little bit fatigued, but they still could have enough in the tank to move on and knock off Iowa State. Marquette, Michigan State, this is going to be fun because this is all going to come down to can you contain Cam Jones. If they can contain Cam Jones, keep him out of the paint, limit David Joplin, their second best player's production, they have a really good chance to knock off the Marquette Golden Eagles. I like Michigan State and Tom Izzo's group.
All right, so we have Ole Miss and Michigan State on one side, and then Auburn and Michigan. Okay, let's start with Auburn, Michigan. Who moves forward?
This is going to be good. I mean, you got Dusty May versus Bruce Pearl. This is like new money versus old money, all right? With Dusty May being that new money on the block, one of the best front courts in college basketball. Vlad Golden, Danny Wolf. I call him the college basketball versions of a poor man's Nikola Jokic. If you haven't seen the big fella pass, he can really drop those dimes. I like Auburn moving on. Looking down here to Ole Miss, Michigan State. Ole Miss continues to try to ride that wave, but Michigan State's too strong. They have too much depth. This time of year when you can go 8 or 9 deep into your bench and get production from those guys in the 8 or 9 spot, they have a Jace Richardson. They have a Jeremy Fears Jr., in the backcourt, one of the best setup guys. I like Michigan State to move on to match up in a heavyweight battle against Auburn.
All right, so here we go. Who is going to come out of the South? We have Bruce Pearl in Auburn or Tom Izzo in Michigan State. I picked Tom Izzo in Michigan State literally in almost every single bracket to get to the Final Four because I don't bet against Tom Izzo.
Hard to do so. Why would you?
And you have a little bit something unexpected here. Who is moving forward?
So Auburn has been the best team in college basketball for pretty much the turn of the new year. They have Janai Broome. They have Miles Kelly. They are deep. They have multiple pieces. They have one of the strongest benches in college basketball. The smart pick tells you to go with the Auburn Tigers.
Okay.
Never bet against Tom Izzo, baby. You never bet against Tom Izzo.
Pause there.
All right? This guy knows how to win at the highest level. This is the reason why it's the 27th consecutive tournament appearance. It's a reason why he has been to 8 Final Fours. Michigan State looks to get to their 9th Final Four. The last time they were in the Final Four, 28-19, when they were led by All-American guard Cassius Winston. I believe this is the year Michigan State gets back to the Final Four in San Antonio. All
right, so there you have it. BJ has Michigan State coming out of the South, not the #1 overall seed in Auburn, but this is why we love March, right? So coming up, we got to get to the East region where, of course, Duke is the #1 seed there. But despite not being the #1 overall seed, do they have the best path to a Final Four? We're going to discuss with BJ coming up. Back here on HQ Spotlight, we're doing a bracket breakdown with BJ Taylor as March Madness. It's finally almost here. We already went through the South region. That's where you have Michigan State coming out of that region, not Auburn. Now we're going to get to the East region where, of course, Duke is the 1 seed here. And this is a region of star power in terms of players, right?
Absolutely.
Because we have Cooper Flagg, we have Mark Sears, we have Chonjay, we have Caleb Love.
Yep, loaded.
Just to name a few. It is loaded. So walk us through how it goes on starting in the round of 64.
All right, so whether or not Cooper Flagg plays major minutes against American or Mount St. Mary's, Duke moves on without a doubt. No question. They won't need him in that one. He'll get his heart rate up. Mississippi State Baylor. Fun game, all right? VJ Edgecombe, one of the top 5 picks will be in this year's NBA draft, plays for the Baylor Bears. Scott Drew, we know he's had a lot of postseason success. I like Baylor moving on to match up against Duke.
All right, now let's get to a 12 versus a 5 here with Liberty and Oregon. And maybe kind of a tough draw here for Liberty. They're getting Oregon, who has looked pretty solid in their first year in the Big Ten. Do you see an upset brewing with Liberty here over Oregon?
I do.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. All right, as good as Oregon has looked as of late, they had a stretch in the middle of their season where they lost 5 straight games. Now, after they lost those 5 straight in the middle of conference play, they went on to win 8 straight. That is where we're getting this momentum from. But I don't trust inconsistent teams in March, all right? I don't like if you've won 4 straight games and you lose 5 straight and you won 3 and you lost 2 in a row. No, consistency, all right? That's what we're all about here today, March Madness.
Yes, it is the body of work.
Yes, we want to see quality performance throughout the course of your season, game in and game out. Oregon has not been that, so this is more about Oregon than it is Liberty. Liberty did win the Conference USA title. I'm going to go with the Flames in this one.
Okay, so you were going with the upset there. Let's go to Arizona and Akron. Who moves forward?
You know, I had a CBS Sports Network game for Akron.
Okay.
I like John Gross. He's a terrific gentleman, sat with us, talked with us, made us feel at home there in Akron, Ohio. It was very cold outside, and for a Florida boy, you don't like that very much.
Yeah.
With that being said, I'm going with Arizona and the Wildcats.
Okay.
All right. I think Arizona, led by Caleb Love, he is one of those guys that, again, this time of year, he can win you games. Now, will he win you games? I don't know. He can shoot you out of games. But I'm going to roll with him having a good day. I'm going to go with Arizona now.
Okay, let's move it along. VCU just coming off of that A-10 title, facing a 6 in BYU. Who moves forward to the next round?
The VCU Rams. All right. The A-10 champs, after coming off of that nail-biter of a win against George Mason in the A-10 championship, continue to win close games, and that's exactly what I think they'll get against the BYU Cougars, right? BYU is a tremendous outside shooting team. Kevin Young has done a great job in his first year in taking over for Mark Pope. But BYU struggles with physicality and they struggle with stingy defense. That's exactly what VCU is. They're going to turn you. They're going to turn you over. They're going to heat you up. They're going to make it a very physical basketball game. That's why I expect VCU to come out on top against the boys from BYU.
All right, so BJ, we're kind of rapid fire through the rest of this round, starting with Wisconsin and Montana. Who moves ahead?
Wisconsin Badgers lost the championship game against Michigan. I think John Tonje is going to start to get his groove again against Montana.
Okay. And then St. Mary's and Vandy, Bama, Robert Morris.
I went with Vandy, SEC team, over St. Mary's. I think that they're going to move on because they came from that rugged SEC.
Okay. And Bama, I know you've said this is, maybe the weakest 2 seed that is out there in this East region, but you have them moving forward as well.
Exactly. Alabama has some injury troubles that we'll hit on here in a second, but Mark Sears is still their point guard. They're still one of the best scoring teams in the country. I think they take care of Robert Morris.
All right, let's move it along to the next round, starting with Duke, Baylor, and then Liberty, Arizona. Run us through who wins those matchups.
Duke, Baylor are a lot of fun, all right? Once again, you have 2 top 5 picks in this year's NBA draft going head-to-head. That is going to be a game filled with NBA scouts. I have the Duke Blue Devils moving on. I think this will be the first game Cooper Flagg is back in full force. Expect them to have a big game in that round of 32 matchup.
All right, and then Liberty, Arizona. We were talking about it like, hey, if Caleb Love, what is he going to do? He's one of the superstars names that we're talking about. How do they match up? Who gets to have the reward of facing Duke in the next round?
Exactly. What we know about Cinderellas is once you win one, you feel like you can win the second. All right. With that being said, I think Caleb Love plays well. I think Arizona and Tommy Lloyd's group is too much physically for Liberty. They'll get on to match up Duke in the next round.
All right. So VCU, we talked about them moving forward against Wisconsin. Who punches their ticket ahead?
VCU, their Cinderella story ends here for me, all right?
Okay.
I love what Steve Corral has. I love Greg Gard's group, the fact that they can score the ball at a very high clip. I think they're too much offense for that great VCU Rams defense. And then an SEC matchup. It's unavoidable, all right? You put 14 teams in, you're going to get an SEC matchup. I like Alabama if Grant Nelson is healthy.
All right, so that's a big if here. All right, we have 4 teams left in this region, on the East region, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So a little chalky here, BJ, but it's okay.
You know what?
We'll let it slide.
It's okay.
It happens.
All right, it's okay. Chalk is all right, people. There's nothing wrong with choosing the better odds to win, all right? It's a good thing to do in life. If you gamble, choose the better odds.
All right, A1 advice there. So Duke, Arizona. Can Caleb Love in the squad be an upset, or do you have Cooper Flagg and Duke advancing?
So this is a matchup of a terrific non-conference battle that took place out in Tucson, Arizona. Duke went out to Tucson, knocked off the Arizona Wildcats when Arizona was not playing the same caliber of basketball they're playing now.
Okay.
A lot of people will choose Arizona in this game. I continue with the chalk. Duke Blue Devils, baby. Let's move them on. All right, next.
Yeah, we called you out on the chalk and you didn't care. But that's what happens when you have Cooper Flagg, right?
It is what it is now.
We'll give you a pass. All right, Wisconsin, Alabama. A lot of folks saying, hey, how is Wisconsin on the 3 line? Because it was Michigan that won the Big Ten title game. They're a 5. We already talked about them. And then Bama, who, again, just to bring it back, you were saying, hey, I think this might be one of the weaker 2 seeds that are out there. So how do you see it shaking out between Wisconsin and Bama?
Well, we've labeled me as a chalk man today, all right? So, I mean, the obvious pick has to be number 2, Alabama, over number 3, Wisconsin, since I just go with the higher seed. Not the case. Wisconsin Badgers, baby. You know why? I believe in John Tonje, all right? This man was sensational throughout the Big Ten tournament. Multiple games over 20 points, had a 32-point outburst and a semifinal win over the Michigan State Spartans. He has the potential to be that guy that could take Greg Gard into an Elite 8 matchup against Wisconsin, as well as good as Alabama is offensively, they are just as bad defensively, and they are not fully healthy if Grant Nelson cannot return. I like the Wisconsin Badgers to represent the Big Ten in the Elite 8 matchup.
All right, Wisconsin, the last time they went to a Final Four, it's been, what, over a decade? It was actually back in 2014 that they went there. Do they advance? Do they get to the Final Four? Is this where it all ends for Duke? Who comes out of the East region?
Well, again, you know, I broke my chalk trajectory, my chalk trend.
Ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly, but it was a difference. Duke, Wisconsin. This will be a fun game, all right? If you like the points that can be scored by Wisconsin, you will enjoy it. Duke, as good as they are offensively, they are just as talented defensively. The only team in college basketball that ranks top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency, according to Ken Pom. Cooper Flagg will be in his groove by now. They will be back to full rhythm. Con Knipple, Kaman Malawach, Sion James, Tyrese Proctor. I believe this is the first year in the post-Coach K era that Duke makes it to a Final Four.
All right, so there you have it. We have Duke coming out of the East region. You mentioned Con Knippel, who is absolutely fantastic in that ACC tournament game here.
Working ball, man.
Yes, it was next man up mentality, even though Cooper Flagg was dealing with that ankle injury. So there you have it. Duke coming out of the East. Now we got to talk about the West region, and we were talking about my Florida Gators. I know I've been accused of being a homer.
The Florida Gators.
And so be it.
You see your enthusiasm is different for the Gators?
No, it is all the same, BJ. But a lot of folks have been saying this is the toughest bracket, the toughest path. There's a lot of high caliber coaching. So how difficult is that path for the Florida Gators to get out of that region? We're going to talk about it coming up with BJ. You're watching HQ Spotlight on CBS Sports Network. Back here with Jacqueline D'Agostino, BJ Taylor. We are running through, BJ's brackets here. We've done the East, we've done the South, and now we're going to do the West region, where the Florida Gators are the 1 seed. And a lot of folks saying this is the toughest path out of all the 1 seeds. The coaching star power is insane. You got Dan Hurley, Rick Pitino, Coach Cal, Bill Self. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yikes. I'm getting nervous rattling it off.
Yeah.
Let's start at the top with the Florida Gators in the first round here, round of 64, taking on Norfolk State, and then a big 8-9 here with UConn and Oklahoma, who advances forward to the round of 32.
Absolutely. Well, we have to start with Florida up top. The SEC tournament champions are playing better basketball than any team in the country right now. Norfolk State had a tremendous year out of the MEAC, but I have the Florida Gators moving on and continuing their winning streak heading into the NCAA tournament. And then looking over at UConn, Oklahoma, man, I'm going to make a lot of people mad up in Hartford, Connecticut right now, okay? 2-time reigning defending champs, Dan Hurley, the premier coach in college basketball for the past 2 seasons. This is the year the UConn Huskies go home in the first round.
Oh, no.
All right? Take that with you. I do not think that they have enough scoring in the backcourt to continue to rely on Alex Caravan and Liam McNeely, all right, and these guys that are playing the wing positions for them to provide that scoring punch. Hassan Diarra, as good as he is defensively, as much as he is a pit bull, they do not have the backcourt scoring. So I have Porter Moser's Oklahoma out of the SEC moving on, 7 quad 1 wins this year. I believe Dan Hurley and UConn goes home. All right, I'm sure my Twitter mentions will be blowing up here anytime soon, but Florida, Oklahoma moving on to the round of 32.
And you know what I felt like all the way back in Hawaii? It kind of felt like, I don't know, something's not right with this UConn squad, and we have them, the 2-time defending national champs, getting bounced in the first round. Well,
when you lose Tristan Newton, one of the best point guards in the country, you lose Stephon Castle, who's on his way to being Rookie of the Year in the NBA, you lose Donovan Clingan inside. It's too much talent to ask Dan Hurley to just recoup each and every single year. They lost a multitude of talented players the year before they won last year, so this is the year it finally caught up with them. They'll retool, and they'll be back next year strong.
Yeah, with the transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh away as well. All right, rattle us off here. Memphis, Colorado State, Maryland, a lot of folks sneaky pick to get to a Final Four, and Grand Canyon, who advances to the round of 32.
Yeah, Memphis, Colorado State will be a fun game. Memphis has one of the best scorers in college basketball, P.J. Haggerty, the AAC Player of the Year, where Colorado State went on to win the Mountain West Conference Tournament, which has not been an easy league all season. I have Colorado State moving on.
All right, and then what about Maryland, Grand Canyon? Who goes forward to the round of 32?
First off, there's no funner place to play college basketball than Grand Canyon, right? If you've ever seen their games, it is a party in that pavilion. They have the lights, they have the rage with the students turn their camera phones on, they're jumping around, they're dancing. If I could play basketball again, I would have considered going to Grand Canyon just for the fun. Nevertheless, March Madness is played at neutral sites. They will not be at home. Maryland will move on with that elite starting 5.
You just brought up Grand Canyon just to bring them down, BJ. All right, we have Mizzou and Drake. Drake could be a spark of a Cinderella story. We've talked about them potentially being a Cinderella team.
Yeah.
But does it happen here? Do they get it done against Mizzou, where we've seen flashes of greatness from them, but as of recently going into the SEC tournament, it has not been great.
Exactly. As good as Drake has been on the court this year, you know, it was a tough year for Drake last year. You didn't catch that. Missouri, on the other hand, has been absolutely tremendous in the SEC. They've ran through that gauntlet. They have picked up some really big wins in that league. I like what Drake brings to the table. I love the fact that they have a Bennett Sturts, all right, a guy in the backcourt. He's a tremendous scorer. He's a terrific playmaker. He's one of the best defenders in that league, but Missouri moves on. I think they're a little too much for Drake. And then I have Texas Tech over UNC Wilmington. JT Toppin, the Big 12 Player of the Year, carries them through their first round matchup.
Okay, and before we move on really quickly, just about Drake. Drake. Say Drake does win, and you've said it, hey, winning is a habit here.
Yeah.
Do you think if they get past Mizzou, that could spark some sort of Cinderella run for them?
Yes, I think it's going to be just as tough for them to beat Missouri as it will be Texas Tech. Why? Drake has one of the best defenses in the country. They have, by definition, the #1 scoring defense in the country. That's better than Houston, that's better than St. John's, that's better than Duke. All right, when you look at what they give up in points per game, it's a 58.4 number. Nobody's better in college basketball now. They have not played the same caliber of teams that the Houston, the St. John's defense have had day in and day out. But if they can move on and get a matchup against the Texas Tech Red Raiders, Texas Tech is not a team that scores the ball at a high clip either. They rely heavily on defense and Graham McCaslin's crew. I like Drake if they can get past Missouri, but I just don't think they'll get through that one.
Okay, so some potential for a Cinderella run if they get over that Mizzou hump.
I'm a fan of Drake.
Yeah, totally. But
Still don't get it.
I know, I get it. In the six, I got you, BJ. All right, so we talked about the elite coaching, right? And I feel like right here it's on full display.
Yeah.
Kansas, Arkansas, that's probably one of the most highly anticipated matchups in round one. And then, of course, Rick Pitino and St. John's facing Omaha. Start us off with Kansas and Arkansas because Coach Cal, Bill Self, they have faced each other before, both of those coming in a title game. They split those, but it all comes to a head. I feel like anything can happen. How do you see it shaking out?
This is incredible. To have a 7-10 matchup between Bill Self and Coach Calipari, I mean, as a basketball fan of coaches, what else could you want? You see the accolades, you see the numbers listed there. When we get to the matchup on the floor, Kansas relies heavily on Hunter Dickinson inside, whereas it's a little bit more balanced by committee, aggression by committee, production by committee. If you're the Arkansas Razorbacks, I like Coach Cal to knock off Bill Self and get a little revenge for that loss in the 2000s when Mario Chalmers defeated his Derrick Rose Memphis Tigers. I like Arkansas to get the win over Bill Self.
Okay, total throwback there. Holding on to some revenge takes a minute, but hey, he can get it.
And since I'm a chalk man, where do you think I'm going with St. John's and Omaha?
I think you're going to go with Rick Pitino because, come on, they're looking great. 30 wins, they win the Big East outright. Okay, perfect. So we have Arkansas and St. John's. Here are the teams that make it to the second round. Florida, Oklahoma. We saw them play in the regular season. We all know what happened. Do the right thing, BJ. Who moves forward to the Sweet 16?
Oklahoma and Porter Moser's group were very fortunate to be a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. They can thank the rest of their league for that. They went 6-12 in conference play. I got Florida moving on.
Okay, and then what about Colorado State and Maryland? Again, a squad that a lot of folks have going all the way to the Final Four in Maryland.
And this is where I should have the Colorado State Rams moving on. I should have them dancing to the Sweet 16. I do not.
Okay.
I have Maryland moving on with that elite starting 5.
All right, so if we move down the bracket, Mizzou, Texas Tech, Arkansas, and St. John's, who moves ahead to the Sweet 16?
This was a challenge for me. I believe in Grant McCaslin's Texas Tech. They're a good matchup for Missouri. JT Toppin inside and that elite defense will cause a lot of problems for Missouri and their high-powered offense.
All right, so we go from one incredible coaching matchup to another. And Coach Cal and Rick Pitino, going to be a coaching masterclass on full display, but who punches their ticket and faces Texas Tech?
A lot of bad blood.
Yeah.
All right, Coach Cal, Rick Pitino, a matchup for the ages. I've got St. John's over Arkansas.
Okay, but we did see Rick Pitino. We were talking about it yesterday,
give the speech, saying, "Hey, be nice to my friend."
For Kentucky fans, when Arkansas went back,
when he comes back, I know what it's like.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear that.
Okay, all right. Again, producer Michael Bonavita wants you to point out that it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So we have Florida, Maryland, Texas Tech, and St. John's. So who punches their ticket ahead?
Well, I want you to know I take these things matchup by matchup, all right? Nobody planned for it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's just what it is. Florida, Maryland up top. This will be a fun game, all right? Maryland has an elite center in the backcourt, Derek Queen, a potential lottery pick in this year's NBA draft. Florida Gators are too much. They're too balanced.
Okay.
Texas Tech, St. John's, another great matchup. I like the fact that St. John's has Kadari Richmond, R.J. Lewis, the Big East Player of the Year. Zuby Ejiofor inside St. John's forces Texas Tech into too many turnovers, turns that defense into offense. We get Florida, St. John's, a matchup that you were very excited about.
I am excited about. I'm a little nervous because I don't know that St. John's is the 8th best team or if they're the worst 2 seed. Again, we mentioned it, 30 wins, winning the Big East outright. I feel like they have a lot of juice. I'm obviously still going with my team, with the Florida Gators, but who do you see advancing to the next round?
It's funny. We hear all the time that it's a make or miss league in the NBA. All right. St. John's does everything well on the basketball court, except one of the most important things, and that's actually shoot the basketball, all right? For a team that won the Big East, they were the worst three-point shooting team in the Big East. No one took less three-pointers in the Big East, and they are second to last in free throw shooting percentage. I believe that finally catches up with Rick Pitino's St. John's against a Florida team that can win low-scoring games, that can win high-scoring games on the back of Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, a guy that's had a lot of Final Four experience. They have players inside that complement those two really, really well. I think Florida just has a little too much offense against St. John's.
You know what? I'm happy to hear that. And I don't know if I'm just feeling like my team has a chip on its shoulder or whatever, but I feel like a lot of folks are counting us out. Yeah, I was on the dance team there for 4 years. I had blood, sweat, and tears on the court. Was there in 2014. We went to the Final Four and lost against Shabazz Napier and the UConn Huskies.
If Florida loses, will they still be your team?
100%.
Or will they be the Florida Gators? Like,
No,
I
they're
can't believe
my
the
team.
Florida Gators lost that game.
They're my team, whether we're in the NIT or the Final Four. It doesn't matter.
See, and that's why you're a real one.
Thanks, BJ. All right, BJ has Florida coming out of the West. Coming up, we finally have to talk about the Midwest, where Houston is the 1 seed here. What team can present the biggest challenge for the Cougars? We're going to dive into it coming up on the other side of this break. Back here on HQ Spotlight, we have finally reached the Midwest region, where Houston is the 1 seed. They are 26-1 since the start of December. And we're going to walk through your bracket, how you see it all shaking out. And we have Houston. They get the 1-16, and then a really tough matchup, 8-9, Gonzaga and Georgia, who punches their ticket to the round of 32 here.
Well, Houston's the most disrespected 1 seed that I've seen in a very long
you've said
time.
that.
Of all the 1 seeds, nobody has picked Houston to win the NCAA tournament. I got Houston over SIUE. Moving on to Gonzaga, Georgia. Mark Few's group played one of the toughest non-conference schedules of any team in the country. They only went 5-5 in quad 1 games this year, but Gonzaga has pieces like Ryan Nembhard, like Graham Ike inside. I like Gonzaga moving on.
All right, we have Clemson and McNeese. Where for Will Wade, a little bit of a homecoming here because he went to Clemson.
Yeah.
He was a manager there of the team, and they also have like the coolest NIL deal with their,
it's awesome, right?
student manager now too.
Awesome.
But Clemson, that is a big pick for folks to move forward there. Do you see a 12 upsetting a 5, or who moves ahead? And then also for Purdue High Point, there is, I'm going to, give a little, show your cards. There is an upset somewhere in here.
There is, 100%. Clemson McNeese, Will Wade has one of the best defenses in college basketball, a top 20 defense. He will be happy to go against the Clemson Tigers, but I have Clemson moving on. And then Purdue High Point. This is where things are going to get fun, all right?
Okay.
And this is more about this is more about Purdue than it is about High Point. Purdue has not been playing good basketball down the stretch. Braden Smith, the Big Ten Player of the Year, has not looked the same throughout the Big Ten tournament. I like High Point. 29-5 on the season, 14-2 in conference play. What did I say the motto is earlier?
You said winning is a habit. Yep, there we go.
These boys are used to winning basketball games. I like High Point to move on and knock off the Purdue Boilermakers.
Oh, man. All right. So now we have Illinois, whether it's Texas or Xavier, and then Kentucky and Troy. Who moves ahead to the round of 32?
Whether it's where Illinois gets Texas or Xavier, I have Illinois moving on in the bracket. And then I like Kentucky and that high-powered offense. They need to get Lamont Butler, their point guard, back, but I like Kentucky over Troy.
All right, a good 7-10 here with UCLA, Utah State, and then Tennessee and Wofford. Who punches their ticket ahead?
UCLA, Mick Cronin's groups are always extremely tough. They're always extremely sound defensively, but I'm going with the UCLA Bruins in this one, and then Tennessee, Wofford. I love Wofford's mascot. I had a good friend, Fletcher McGee from Orlando, Florida, that went to Wofford. I still went with the Tennessee Volunteers over the Wofford Bulldogs.
Perfect. Shout out Fletcher. Apologies there. So let's go to Houston Gonzaga. We're here. We have the Zags. Their streak of getting to the Sweet 16. It is no longer.
And what a challenge this is for the Houston Cougars, though, to have this matchup. This is probably the toughest round of 32 matchup of any team. I still have Houston moving on behind the great play of LJ Cryer and Milos Uzan. High Point Clemson, fun matchup. I should have High Point dancing. I do not. I have Clemson moving on. All
right, so it's going to be Houston, Clemson. If we work our way down the bracket, we have Illinois, Kentucky, UCLA, and Tennessee, 6-3, 7-2. Who moves on?
It's fun because we have a couple of Big Ten SEC Challenge matchups right here, all right? And you know what I did? I didn't go with the common answer. The SEC is the better conference. Actually, I did. I went with Kentucky moving on, and I went with Tennessee's Rick Barnes moving on. We're going to have a little SEC fun.
Okay. I love a little SEC on SEC. So we have Houston and Clemson, and then we have Kentucky and Tennessee, teams that have seen each other already before in the regular season. Who moves ahead?
Houston, Clemson, again, a couple really good defensive teams. It will be a fun battle, but I think the way Milos Uzan, the Oklahoma transfer, has been playing as of late, Houston will continue to be the more physical team, the tougher team. They will dominate the offensive glass. They will be able to move on from Clemson in a really, really hard-fought battle. But Houston has to make some outside jump shots.
Okay.
They really do. Kentucky, Tennessee, contrast of styles. Kentucky has been a top 10 offense when they are fully healthy in college basketball. Tennessee, on the other hand, has one of the best defenses. Rick Barnes' group, led by Zakai Ziegler, the Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC. Chaz Lanier, one of the best scorers in the SEC. Tennessee needs front court production from Igor Milicic and Felix Akpar. I do think they'll get it. When they need it the most, they move past Mark Pope's injury-riddled Kentucky Wildcats.
All right, yeah, and Gainey, by the way, was absolutely phenomenal.
Sensational off the bench.
Yeah,
yep, X-Factor guy.
Exactly, against the Florida Gators. Let's go here. We have a 2-1.
Wow, again.
But, you know, we've had our fair share of upsets getting to this point.
Yeah.
But do you see Houston, the team that you say has been disrespected on the one line there? Do you see them punching their ticket to get to a Final Four? Or does Rick Barnes' squad and all the talent they have, the different playmakers, do they pull off the upset, if you will?
Well, Tennessee's come out of the toughest conference in college basketball. We just mentioned their pieces they have around them. The boys from Knoxville played really, really well in the ACC tournament, the SEC tournament, even though they lost to Houston. The Cougars are too much. Put those number ones in there, baby, all right? Number one over number two. You should have known that was coming because I've been chalk all day.
Yeah.
I like the Houston Cougars moving on to the Final Four. They are fully healthy for the first time in a very long time in Kelvin Sampson's Houston's tenure. They had an injury to Marcus Sasser a few years ago, which ended their run chances.
Yep.
They had an injury last year to Jamal Said, which ruined their NCAA tournament chances. This is the year fully healthy. Houston gets into that Final Four and has a real chance to win the whole thing.
Yeah, and Houston, 6 Final Fours, but no titles there, and this is what their third straight time being a 1 seed, which is absolutely remarkable. Okay, so Houston comes out of the Midwest for BJ, and we finally have his Final Four. It is the 4 1 seeds, and then we have a little Michigan State in there, so it's Michigan State, Duke, Florida, and Houston that BJ has advancing to the Final Four, so you know what that means. It is time to crown a champion. Is Michigan State? Are we going to go that way? Not go so chalk? We'll have to see who is winning it all, and we'll discuss with BJ coming up. Back here on HQ Spotlight, if you've been watching this whole time, we've gone region by region, and finally, through all of BJ's brackets, we have gotten to a Final Four. We have Michigan State and Florida, Duke and Houston. Before we talk about who moves on, I want to talk about the coaching and the experience, because we have Tom Izzo versus Todd Golden, and then Kelvin Sampson versus John Shire.
Right.
On both sides, there's a coach who has been there, has been to the big dance as a head coach, and on the flip side, in Todd Golden and John Shire, their first time potentially. So how much does experience matter when it comes to coaching in a Final Four situation?
In the coaching world, right, Michigan State having that experience with Tom Izzo is going to be huge, right? 8 Final Four appearances. He knows what it's like. He knows how to prepare his group, as well as Kelvin Sampson, a future Hall of Famer. He's been there before, right? This is the first time for Todd Golden and John Shire, if they were to get to the Final Four, that they'd be in this position. So it'll be a learning experience for them. That does not mean that they can't still get it done.
All right, so who advances to the championship game, starting with Michigan State and Florida?
When you look at Michigan State first off, all right, defense, strength in numbers. That has been their recipe for success. They want to wear Florida down with that depth. I believe the Florida Gators have too much depth as well in terms of what they can bring off the bench. I think Walter Clayton Jr. will be the best player on the floor in that game. I think he is able to lead the Florida Gators past the Michigan State Spartans. They just have too much offense.
All right, trying to do it again for the first time since 06-07. Let's talk about
Noah,
Duke.
Corey Brewer, Al Horford.
I know, the Gator boys that stay hot, as they say. Duke and Houston, who punches their ticket? Does Houston do it? I know one is your heart pick and one is your head pick.
Yes.
So which one are we going with?
Right, so my heart tells me Houston. Okay? But my mind has told me to go with the Duke Blue Devils. I believe this is going to be one of the best games of the NCAA tournament if we're able to get it. Cooper Flagg going against one of the best defenses in college basketball, a veteran group, a senior group against those young boys. It'll be a lot of fun. I believe that game will be Cooper Flagg's best game. All
right, so we have 2 1 seeds in Florida and Duke in the national championship game, which is on CBS. By the way, we talked about Walter Clayton on the Florida side of things, and there's depth, there's size with Florida, but when we look at Duke, It's Cooper Flagg, and he's the projected #1 overall pick in the upcoming draft for a reason. And even when he wasn't playing in that ACC tourney, we talked about it, Con Knipple stepped up and was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's going to be something. All right,
Yeah.
we get this matchup between Florida and Duke. This will be a national championship for the ages on CBS. I believe, though, Cooper Flagg, being the guy that he's been all season long, is strong, right? Con Knipple, Kaman Malawach inside, Tyrese Proctor. Those guys will do what they need to do against Florida.
Okay.
The X factor will be Isaiah Evans off the bench. If you remember the last time Duke won a national title, they had a guy by the name of Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen came off the bench as a freshman for that team when they knocked off the Wisconsin Badgers. I believe Isaiah Evans will play the same role for the Duke Blue Devils. This is a potential future first-round draft pick if he decides to come out next season. Isaiah Evans can play, Isaiah Evans can ball, and he comes off the bench. In a game of this magnitude, you need that X factor, and I believe that Isaiah Evans will be that X factor.
Okay, and one final question for you. As you have Duke here winning the national championship, it would be the first time in the Jon Scheyer era that he's been able to do this. What would that do for his legacy? What would that do moving forward? Expectations, there's already a lot of expectations with Duke, but now you have a new coach who is already taking your team to the top here. What would that do for him in terms of his legacy?
It's twofold, all right? For Jon Scheyer, it cements him as the guy for the next 30 to 40 years, as long as he decides to stay at Duke, as long as he wants to be there, as well as it takes that weight off his back. The pressure is gone. There won't be the question of, can somebody do it if his last name does not start with a K, and it's very, very hard for us to spell, all right? If it's not Coach Krzyzewski, they'll believe that Coach Jon Scheyer can do it. That's number one. Number two, that will cement Cooper Flagg as an all-time Duke great, all right? Being the #1 overall draft pick does not cement you as a Duke all-time great, all right? Championships and Final Fours does. You think of the Christian Laettners, 1 title. J.J. Redick, title. Jay Williams, title, all right? There's a lot of talent that's come through Duke. The Kyrie Irvings of the world and all these guys that went high in the NBA draft. The Zion Williamsons. That doesn't make you an all-time Duke legend. If Cooper Flagg can deliver the first championship post-Coach K era, he is a top 5 all-time Dookie.
All right, BJ, we certainly appreciate it. There you have it. He has Duke winning the whole thing and getting their first national championship in the Jon Scheyer era. We did it. Also a great time. A reminder, bracket games, fill out those brackets. You can play. Just download the CBS Sports app. Go to cbssports.com/bracket, or you can scan that QR code on your screen. And that reminds me, BJ, I have got to fill out my bracket.
Yes.
I got to do it ASAP while it's all fresh. Mine. Exactly, that's what I will do.